On a bright October afternoon in the hills outside Westport, Connecticut billionaire Elise Blackwood stood on the flagstone steps of her estate, arms crossed, watching a man in a faded work jacket climb out of a rusted Chevy Silverado with 200,000 miles on it and a tailpipe that had been wired back on twice. She looked at the truck the way you look at something that wandered onto your property by mistake. Behind her, 3 associates in tailored suits pretended not to notice. "You're the mechanic," she said. Wes Tierney pulled his canvas tool bag from behind the seat. "You called my shop. My assistant called your shop." She looked him over, not rude, assessing. "I've had 2 certified Jaguar specialists from Manhattan and a collector consultant who charges $400 an hour. None of them could figure out what's wrong with it. Where's the car?" She seemed mildly surprised he didn't offer credentials. No pitch, no reassurance. She tilted her head toward the east wing. "The motor house. Ronan will take you." A man detached from the group on the steps. Mid-40s, dark blazer, a jawline that looked like it had been designed for confidence. He smiled at Wes with the precise warmth of someone who had practiced being approachable until it became indistinguishable from the real thing. "Ronan Drake," he said. "Elise's business partner. Right this way." The motor house was climate-controlled, 6 bays, museum lighting, 4 modern cars worth more than Wes's entire block back in Stamford. In the 5th bay, under a fitted cover, sat a shape he recognized by silhouette alone. Ronan pulled the cover back. A 1967 Jaguar E-Type Series 1 Roadster, British racing green. The long hood, the perfect proportions, the particular stillness of a machine that had been important once and knew it. Wes set his bag on the workbench and walked around it without touching it. He checked the body seams by feel, ran his fingers along the bonnet gap, examined the chassis number against the plate. Authentic. He moved to the engine. When he opened the bonnet and looked properly at what was underneath, his hands went still. The external components were correct, matching numbers, period-appropriate hardware, but nested behind the intake manifold, hidden beneath restoration work, so meticulous it had fooled every specialist before him, was a specific configuration he had seen exactly once in his life. A custom fuel delivery modification, a hand-machined cooling bracket, a particular approach to the SU carburetor linkage that wasn't in any shop manual ever published. It was a signature, not written, not stamped. Built. He'd seen it in a workshop outside Dusseldorf, in the hands of the man who taught him everything he knew about engines that mattered. Henrik Brandt. Wes stood up slowly and stared at the engine bay for a long time. Henrik Brandt had died in 2011. A heart attack in his workshop, alone, surrounded by the machines he'd spent his life understanding. Wes had been 24 when he'd spent 11 months in that workshop, learning things about engines that couldn't be learned from manuals. He'd gone home when his wife Kara got the diagnosis. He never went back. And now Henrik's fingerprints were inside a billionaire's Jaguar in Connecticut. That wasn't random. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story reaches. Hit like and stay until the end, because what Wes found next changed everything. He didn't say anything when Ronan led him back to the steps. Elise was still there, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, surrounded by the quiet machinery of people who were paid to orbit her. "Well," she said, "I can fix it." The associates exchanged glances. Ronan spoke first. "The Jaguar specialist said the entire fuel system needed." "The fuel system's fine," Wes said. "The carburetors were rejetted by someone who understood them better than whoever looked at them last. The car isn't broken. It's been modified by someone exceptional, and the people who came before me didn't recognize what they were looking at." Elise studied him. "And you do. I know who did the work." That wasn't entirely true. He knew the method. The rest of it he needed to think about before saying to anyone. Elise tilted her head and said, in the tone of someone making a dinner reservation, "Fix it, and I'll give you a blank check." Polite laughter from the suits. Wes didn't laugh. He held her gaze 1 beat longer than was comfortable. "I'll need a few days," he said, "and I work alone." He was back in his truck by noon. He sat in the driveway and wrote 2 words on the back of an old receipt, Henrik Brandt. Then he drove home to pick up his daughter. Juniper was 6 and did not believe in being picked up from school quietly. She came through the front doors with her backpack unzipped, her ponytail half undone. Holding a drawing, she pressed against the truck window before he'd fully stopped. Dad, look." It appeared to be either a house or a very ambitious sandwich. "What is it?" "It's our garage." That's you fixing things? That's me supervising. He looked at it more carefully. Who's that? He pointed at a figure in the corner. That's Mr. Boots. Boots was a stray cat who had been living in the alley behind the garage for 2 years and who Juniper had named and considered a business partner. He's doing inventory. Wiz pulled out of the school lot. Good day? Aiden said my drawing of a horse looked like a shoe. What'd you say? I said his face looked like a shoe. She paused. Miss Rivera said that was unkind. It was a little unkind. He started it. The logic was airtight for a 6-year-old. They drove home in the comfortable noise of cracker eating and low radio. And Wes thought about the Jaguar and thought about Henrik Brandt and tried to hold both things together without dropping one. That night, after dinner and the negotiated drama of bedtime, Wes sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee and opened his laptop. Henrik Brandt, German automotive engineer, master restorer of British and German sports cars through the 80s and 90s, died 2011. He'd been told that. He knew it. But some part of him had never fully absorbed it, which was why he still searched the name sometimes. Because Henrik had been the kind of person who seemed too permanent to have simply stopped. Wes had been a kid from Connecticut with an engineering degree and a restlessness he couldn't name when he'd written an actual paper letter to Henrik's workshop asking to apprentice. Henrik had responded in 4 days. One line. Come, we'll see if your hands are worth anything. He'd laughed so hard he'd choked on his coffee. 11 months in that workshop changed everything he understood about machines. Henrik taught by watching, not explaining, and Wes watched until his hands knew things his brain hadn't caught up to. Then Kara called. The diagnosis. He came home and never went back. Watched her fight for 2 years. Lost her. Became a father alone with a daughter who'd just turned 2. He closed the laptop. Henrik Brandt's signature modification was inside Elise Blackwood's Jaguar. The question was what it meant and who else knew. He started work the next morning. Elise had arranged access, a canoe, a text from her assistant saying the staff would leave him alone. He brought documentation equipment. Calipers, a camera. He was going to be thorough. The first day was examination. He photographed everything, measured clearances, recorded every modification with the methodical patience of someone assembling evidence, because that was exactly what he was beginning to suspect he was doing. Henrik's work was extraordinary. The fuel delivery modification shouldn't have worked theoretically. But Henrik never thought in straight lines. He thought in consequences. The result was an engine that ran smoother and more efficiently than anything the factory had produced. It was worth an enormous amount of money. Around noon, Elise appeared. Alone. No phone visible. Jeans and a dark sweater, hair down. She stood in the doorway as if checking whether she was allowed to enter her own space. You actually came back, she said. Said I would. She looked at the documentation spread across the workbench. The other mechanics didn't take notes like this. The other mechanics weren't finding what I'm finding, he told her carefully. The car had been worked on by a man named Henrik Brandt, the best automotive restoration engineer in Europe for 2 decades. Dead since 2011, his work was extraordinarily rare and increased the car's value dramatically. How much? She said. With provenance verified, probably double what you think it's worth. Maybe more. She stared at the engine. How did a car like this end up in my garage? That's a good question, Wes said. Because someone who knows what this modification is worth hasn't told you about it. And I'd want to know why. The second morning, Wes found Ronan Drake already in the motor house. Standing near the workbench, looking at the photographs. Hands in pockets, posture casual. The body language of a man who wanted you to know he belonged here. Mr. Tierney. The half smile. Just curious about the car. I found it for Elise, actually. Tracked it down through a private dealer in Zurich. Did you know about the modification? The dealer mentioned custom work. Part of the appeal. Did you know who did it? Ronan's expression stayed pleasant. Should I? Good liar. The kind who told the truth in every way except the one that mattered. I'll need the provenance documentation, Wes said. Everything that came with the car. I can look into that. Ronan picked up his jacket and left. Wes stood in the silence and thought about the photographs on the workbench and the practiced ease of a man who was either harmless or significantly more dangerous than he appeared. He photographed the documentation again and sent copies to his own encrypted email. On the third day, he found the second thing. He'd pulled the passenger door panel to inspect a chassis seam. Behind the original sound deadening, Tucked in a cavity near the B-pillar was a small sealed envelope. Paper yellowed at the edges, adhesive dried and resealed with age. On the front, in handwriting he recognized with a physical jolt, was a single line in German. Für den, der findet, was ich hier getan habe. Du bist besser als du denkst. For the person who finds what I've done here, you're better than you know. He sat on the shop stool and held the envelope in both hands and breathed. He didn't open it. Not here, not alone, not without understanding more about what he was holding. That night, after Juniper was asleep with one arm around a stuffed rabbit she'd named Professor, Wes opened the envelope at the kitchen table. A single folded page in Henrik's cramped handwriting. He read it twice, then a third time. Then he stared at the ceiling for a long time. Henrik had known the Jaguar was being used as the centerpiece of a financial fraud. Asset inflation, fabricated provenance, the systematic manipulation of valuations across a network of shell companies. He'd hidden the note because he didn't trust the people around him and didn't have enough proof. He'd written down a name, Ronan Drake. Wes didn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about a dead man's hidden evidence and a 6-year-old sleeping down the hall and a fraud that had been running for over a decade, and how none of those things should have been connected but now were. He told Elise the next day. He put the letter on the workbench between them and watched her read it. He watched her face move through recognition, calculation, a controlled vertigo, the ground shifting beneath her. "How did you know to trust this?" she said. "I knew Henrik. He trained me. I recognize his handwriting." She was quiet. Then, "Ronan's been my business partner for 9 years. I know. I need to make a call." Her voice was steady. He suspected that cost her something. The attorney was a woman named Margot Sinclair, 63, sharp-eyed, 3 decades of financial litigation. She'd never had contact with Ronan Drake, which was why Elise called her. Margot looked at the letter, took her reading glasses off, and said, "If what this suggests is accurate, you're not looking at a business dispute. You're looking at federal crimes." She paused. "And you cannot tip him off. Not a word, not a look." Was finished the Jaguar on a Thursday. 4 hours of final calibration, adjusting Henrik's modified fuel delivery until the engine sang the way its builder had intended. He sat in the driver's seat and started it. The sound was extraordinary, not loud. Layered, purposeful. A mechanical voice tuned by someone who understood the difference between power and noise. Elise drove it that afternoon. Wes sat in the passenger seat while she took the back roads north, through October hills burning orange and yellow. After 10 minutes, she stopped fighting the car and started talking to it. "Margot wants forensic accountants," she said. "Good. She thinks this is bigger than the car, so do I." 3 weeks passed. Normal work, normal days. Juniper lost her first molar and spent 48 hours displaying the gap to anyone within range, including the UPS driver who had not asked. Wes cooked dinner, helped with homework, had the small recurring argument about whether cereal counted as dinner. It did not. Juniper's counter-argument was that it was grain with milk, and what was oatmeal if not that, and it was better logic than it should have been. Then Ronan Drake showed up at the garage. Wes was alone. Juniper was at school. Ronan walked in wearing a coat that cost more than Wes's truck. "Mr. Tierney, I wanted to have a conversation. Off the record. There's nothing to talk about." "I disagree." Ronan shifted slightly. "You found something in a car. You gave it to someone who doesn't understand the full context." "I understand the instinct, but..." "Ronan, you've got a daughter." The half-smile thinned. 6 years old, right?" The garage changed temperature. Wes stood very still. Something settled in his chest. Not fear. Something older. "You need to leave," Wes said. "Right now. And you never say my daughter's name or her age again." Ronan looked at him for a long moment. Then he adjusted his collar and walked out. Wes called Margot Sinclair within 60 seconds. "He came to my shop. He mentioned Juniper." Margot's voice went precise. "Did he threaten her directly?" "Clearly enough. Stay there. I'm calling the U.S. Attorney's Office now." The federal prosecutor, a woman named AUSA Tara Langston, took Wes's statement that afternoon. She asked good questions, open ones. Let him build the sequence from the beginning. When he described Henrik's modification, she leaned forward. "And you can identify this as definitively the work of Henrik Brandt?" "I've seen this exact configuration in 2 places in my life. Once in Henrik's workshop in Dusseldorf, once in Elise Blackwood's Jaguar. The probability of 2 people independently arriving at this combination is not realistic. This is a signature." She looked at him. "Mr. Tierney, have you done this before?" Testified? No, you present well. I'm just telling you what I found. The threat constituted witness tampering. Ronan Drake's bail was revoked within the week. The forensic accountant's report mapped 12 years of financial manipulation. 2 independent document examiners verified Henrik's handwriting. A restoration specialist named Klaus Hoffmann, who'd worked alongside Henrik for 15 years, submitted a 12-page analysis of the engine modification that the prosecutor called definitive. Ronan Drake pleaded guilty to federal securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and witness tampering on a cold morning in February. Sentencing. 21 years. Wes heard about it from Margot at 8 in the morning while making Juniper's oatmeal. It's done, Margot said. He turned the heat down on the stove. Okay, you should know your testimony mattered, not just procedurally. The timeline it established, the proof of intent going back to when Henrik worked on that car. It made this airtight. He stirred the oatmeal. Henrik made it airtight. I just found it. You knew what you were looking at, Margot said. That's not nothing. Juniper appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair catastrophic. Is the oatmeal done? 2 minutes. She sat and stared at the bowl with the patience of someone who had accepted the universe's timeline but wanted it noted that she was waiting. The months after the sentencing were quiet in the way Wes needed them to be. He fixed cars. He made dinner. He picked Juniper up from school and had the familiar small arguments about bedtime. He and Elise had fallen into something neither of them named, because naming it would have required certainty, and neither was certain yet. They talked 3 or 4 times a week. She came by the garage twice in January, leaning against the workbench while he worked. Juniper met her properly on a Saturday when Elise came by, and Juniper happened to be in the garage helping, which meant she sat on the rolling stool and handed tools 40% of the time and talked the other 60. Are you the Jaguar lady? Juniper said with complete directness. Elise looked at Wes. Am I? Apparently. Then yes, I'm the Jaguar lady. Juniper studied her with the focused assessment of a 6-year-old conducting a serious evaluation. Dad fixed your car. He's the best mechanic. This was not pride. It was a statement of natural law. Do you want to see the other cars? And just like that, Juniper gave Elise a tour. Every vehicle described with a mix of absorbed technical knowledge and completely invented narrative. The Subaru had a very complicated heart situation. The Honda needed emotional support. Afterward, when Juniper had gone upstairs, Elise looked at Wes with an expression he couldn't fully decode. She's extraordinary, she said quietly. She's also a complete menace. Just so you have the full picture. In March, a journal arrived. A package on the doorstep, Elise's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a leather-bound workshop journal, deep brown, worn at the corners. On the inside cover, in Henrik's cramped script, Henrik Brandt, Dusseldorf, 1989. 2 years of entries. Sketches of engine configurations, notes on modifications, the private working thoughts of a mind Wes recognized the way you recognize a voice you haven't heard in years but never forgot. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time, turning pages, reading the German slowly. At the back, a note from Elise. Klaus Hoffmann found this through a private archive in Hamburg. He thought you should have it, so did I. Juniper found him still sitting there when she came home. She looked over his shoulder. It's in a different language. German. Can you read it? Slowly. She studied the sketch on the open page. It looks like your drawings, when you explain stuff to me. He looked at the diagram. He'd sketched engine problems on the backs of envelopes for customers, for Juniper, for himself, hundreds of times. He taught me that too, Wes said. Draw the problem. It helps you see it. Juniper straightened up. Was he a good person? Wes thought about it carefully. Henrik had been difficult, impatient, caustic when tired. Not simple or easy. He was a person who tried to do good work, Wes said, even when it was hard. Juniper processed this. That's what you do, she said. She said it the way she said most things, directly, without intending it to land. Then she went to get a snack because she was 6 and what to eat was immediately more pressing. Wes sat with the journal and the weight of what she'd said, which settled into him quietly and stayed. In April, Elise told him about the Ashford Heritage Motor Institute outside Oxford, a 2-year residency for master-level restoration specialists. Klaus Hoffmann had submitted Wes's documentation of the Jaguar modification, his technical analysis, a letter about his training under Henrik. The program director had contacted Elise. They want to speak with you, she said. I have a 6-year-old. I run a garage in Stamford. The program has family housing. There's a school 3 miles away. He was quiet. You told me at Christmas you wanted to stop treading water, she said. I don't think you said it as a throwaway thing. He told Juniper on a Saturday morning. Pancakes, extra syrup, which she recognized immediately as a signal. Dad, she said, what's happening? You let me have the syrup. You always say 1 tablespoon. So he explained. A school for people who fix very important old cars, in England for 2 years. Juniper ate and listened. Would we live there? That's what I'm figuring out. Would Mrs. Petrov come? Mrs. Petrov was 74, Polish-born, no filter, and had been looking after Juniper since she was 3. Mrs. Petrov lives here, but we'd come back. Juniper chewed. Then, does the Jaguar lady know? She's the one who told me about it. Is she coming? The question came directly, without embarrassment, because Juniper hadn't learned to be embarrassed by obvious questions. I don't know, Wes said honestly. I think you should ask her. Professor thinks so too. Professor has opinions now? Professor has always had opinions. You just haven't been listening. She slid off her chair. Can I watch cartoons? 30 minutes. 45. 35. Fine. He sat at the table with the syrup and his coffee and thought about what his 6-year-old and a stuffed rabbit had just told him to do. He drove to the estate on a Sunday. Didn't call ahead. The gate opened. He parked and walked up the steps. Elise answered the door herself. Sweater, jeans, reading glasses, a pen in her hand. I had a conversation with Juniper, he said, standing in the entryway. She asked if you were coming to England. He wasn't going to arrange this carefully. He was just going to say it. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Not in the way you think I want to hear. She kissed him, not dramatically. The way you kiss someone when you've been thinking about it for months and run out of patience. Slightly off-center at first because they were both off-balance. Then it wasn't. I've been waiting for you to do that for 3 months, she said. I finally gave up. I was being careful. I know. It's one of your best qualities. It's also occasionally deeply aggravating. Juniper said I should ask you. I like Juniper enormously. Professor agreed. She laughed. The real one. Her company had a London office. Oxford wasn't far. England had good schools. They weren't planning 20 years. They were figuring out what was next. The morning they left, Wes walked through the empty garage one last time. Patrick, Gerald's nephew, 24, earnest and competent, would run things while he was gone. The garage would still be here. That mattered in ways he couldn't fully articulate. It was the thing he'd built with what he had in the years when what he had was limited by grief and a 2-year-old and the narrowed scope of survival. He thought about Kara, who had sat in a car he was working on 3 months into their relationship and said, "You talk to the engines." And he'd said he didn't. And she'd said, "You were just explaining to that carburetor why the repair was going to feel better when it was done." He turned off the last light. He locked the door. The Institute sat on converted estate grounds outside Oxford. Stone buildings, bay doors open, and the smell that hit him before anything else. Oil, metal, old leather, engine warmth. It smelled like Henrik's workshop. The director, a man named Aldrich Whitmore, shook his hand and said, "Klaus speaks very highly of you. Klaus is generous. Klaus is precise. He's not particularly generous." In the back bay, under restoration by a young specialist who moved around it with focused competence, was a 1969 Porsche 908. Race history, original driver documented, engine rebuilt in the 80s by parties unknown. Wes stopped. "We're trying to establish whether the rebuild was sympathetic to original spec," Whitmore said, "or a departure." Wes looked at the engine. He thought about Henrik's journal on his bedside table, about the margin note he'd memorized without meaning to. The point is not to fix the broken thing. The point is to understand it well enough that it tells you how it wants to be whole. He'd thought Henrik was being philosophical. Maybe he'd been literal. Elise arrived on a Friday. She found him in the back bay, already documenting the 908. She leaned in the doorway and watched him for a moment before he noticed. "How's the 908? "Complicated. Whoever did the crankshaft work made a decision I haven't decoded yet. Interesting good or interesting concerning? Interesting like someone knew something specific, and I want to know what they knew." She smiled. Henrik's method. Henrik's method. That evening, the 3 of them ate dinner in the house on the Institute grounds. Slightly chaotic because Juniper was still establishing the kitchen's geography and had strong opinions about where things went. After dinner, Juniper fell asleep on the couch with the English wildlife book Elise had brought open on her chest. Wes and Elise sat at the kitchen table with the remains of the wine and the quiet of a house that was new, but beginning, tentatively, to feel like something. "I keep thinking about what you said," Elise said. "About Henrik, about the honest work outlasting everything else. What about it? I spent years building something and trusting that the work itself was enough, that the fraud around it wouldn't define it." She paused. "I think that's mostly true. But I also use that belief as a reason not to look carefully at things I should have." "Probably some of both," Wes said. "You hold the mistake and the good work at the same time. Neither one cancels the other." She looked at him. "Henrik taught you that?" "No," he said. "That one I figured out myself." Outside the windows, the English night was dark and mild. Juniper made a small sound in her sleep. The wildlife book slid an inch toward the floor. Neither of them moved to catch it. They sat with the quiet and the wine and the honest weight of where they were. Not a beginning, not an ending, but somewhere in the middle of things, which was where most of real life actually happened. Wes looked at Juniper on the couch. He looked at Elise across the table. He thought about a dead man who'd hidden evidence inside a car because he believed someone would eventually know what they were looking at. He thought about a garage in Stamford that would still be there when he came back. He thought about all the roads that had looked like detours and turned out to be the route. He picked up the wildlife book before it fell. He put it on the table, open to the page Juniper had reached. Outside, somewhere in the English dark, something moved along its own path, unhurried, following whatever logic it had been given. Everything else could wait until morning.